The live broadcast began like any other. Bright lights, cameras rolling, and millions of viewers tuned in around the world. Zendaya sat gracefully on the stage, her posture confident yet relaxed, ready for a light-hearted interview. Fans were buzzing in the chat, some laughing, others speculating about what the show might reveal tonight. She smiled politely at the audience, occasionally glancing at the host, radiating a calm energy that seemed to make everyone lean in a little closer. Then, the doors at the back of the set opened. A hush fell over the crowd, almost imperceptible at first, but it grew heavier with each step. Jonathan Roumie walked in, unassuming, composed, almost ordinary in appearance, with a serene presence that seemed to command more attention than any flashy entrance could. No bodyguards, no dramatic gestures, just a quiet confidence that made the audience lean forward in curiosity. There was something different about him, something that felt alive, though none of the viewers could put it into words just yet. The host cleared his throat, smiling nervously. "Jonathan, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you here tonight. Could you tell our audience about your thoughts on Jesus?" Jonathan's gaze was steady, warm, and completely free of arrogance. He nodded once, a small, calm motion, and replied in a voice that was soft but carried an undeniable weight. "Of course. I'd love to share." The cameras zoomed in on Zendaya, who was leaning slightly forward, her curiosity piqued. She had seen countless interviews, countless celebrities on live TV, but there was something about this moment that already felt different. Even before Jonathan spoke a word, the energy in the studio had shifted. It was subtle. The audience straightened in their seats, the camera operators adjusted with more care, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then he spoke. The words were simple, unadorned, yet they hit with the force of something profoundly real. Jesus isn't just a figure in history. He's alive today. And he's speaking to each of us, even in moments we feel unseen, unheard, or unworthy. A whisper spread across the live audience. Some leaned forward in shock. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether they had heard correctly. Zendaya's eyes widened slightly, and she instinctively placed a hand on her chest. Something about the tone, the calm authority, and the sincerity of the words stirred something deep within her. Even the host paused mid-sentence, the prepared scripts forgotten on the desk in front of him. Fans watching online began flooding the chat with emojis and messages. "Did he just say that? Wow. Pause the show, I need to breathe." Zendaya's face, though flushed-faced. There was an unspoken tension building, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and disbelief. The atmosphere wasn't just tense, it was electric, alive with a silent recognition that something monumental was unfolding before their eyes. Jonathan's calm presence contrasted sharply with the sudden realization sweeping through the room. Every pair of eyes turned toward him. Every mind seemed to focus, some skeptics stiffening, some believers leaning in, and Zendaya. She was caught somewhere in between, her breath slightly held, her gaze fixed, waiting to see what would happen next. And in that moment, seconds stretched into what felt like eternity. Everyone, the host, the audience, the staff, and viewers at home, sensed it. Something in Jonathan's words, in his serene energy, was about to leave the world watching speechless. The studio was alive with the hum of activity, but a quiet tension had begun to settle over the set. Cameras clicked and whirred, microphones captured every subtle sound, and the bright stage lights reflected off Zendaya's poised figure. Normally, she would exchange smiles with the host, laugh at witty remarks, or interact lightly with the audience. Tonight, though, there was something in the air that made even the most seasoned crew members pause and take notice. Jonathan Roumie sat, or rather, stood with quiet confidence, a few feet away from Zendaya. His presence wasn't loud or showy. It wasn't the kind of energy that demanded attention with flamboyance or force. Instead, it was steady, calm, and magnetic. It was the kind of presence that subtly reminded everyone in the room that something important was about to happen. The audience, though trying to maintain their casual demeanor, leaned in slightly in their chairs. Phones were held at the ready. Something in the very air seemed to suggest, "Pay attention. This matters." The host, trying to regain his usual composure, smiled and gestured toward Zendaya. "Zendaya, you've seen countless interviews. But Jonathan's message about Jesus is unique. How do you feel about sitting here and hearing his thoughts, live?" Zendaya's eyes sparkled with curiosity, but there was also a flicker of something else, anticipation. I'm curious, she said softly. I've heard of his work, of course, but seeing it in person, I feel like this is going to be different. Jonathan spoke then, softly, but every word seemed to carry weight, as if the calm around him amplified his sincerity. Jesus is more than history. He's present. He speaks in silence, in doubts, and in moments when we think no one is listening. He is alive in ways most of us don't recognize, and his love reaches every heart, regardless of fear, hesitation, or past mistakes. The audience shifted in their seats. Some leaned forward, not wanting to miss a single word. Others whispered among themselves, exchanging glances that mixed disbelief with wonder. Even the host paused, unsure whether to interject or let Jonathan continue. There was a magnetic gravity in his voice, a softness that demanded attention without a hint of force. Zendaya's expression changed subtly, almost imperceptibly, but it was clear to everyone watching that she was moved. Her lips parted slightly, her brow furrowed in quiet thought, and her hand hovered near her heart as if to steady herself against the sudden rush of emotion. She wasn't just listening, she was feeling it. As Jonathan continued, he spoke not just with words, but with energy, with presence. Faith isn't about rules. It's not about performing or appearing perfect. It's about knowing you are seen, known, and loved. Even when doubt overwhelms you, even when the world whispers that you're not enough, his voice is there. Calm, steady, loving, waiting for you to notice. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every subtle reaction. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably, skeptical eyes narrowing, but their bodies betrayed curiosity. Others wiped at tears foaming without warning. The energy in the studio was a strange combination of reverence, disbelief, and awe, like everyone collectively sensed that this moment was bigger than a simple interview segment. Zendaya's gaze met Jonathan's, and for a brief second, the outside world seemed to vanish. The lights, the cameras, even the audience, they all blurred into the background. It was just her, him, and the weight of his words sinking into the space between them. She whispered almost to herself, "I've never heard it like this, never." In that pause, the audience exhaled collectively. The moment had shifted. The setup was complete. What had begun as a normal live broadcast had become something profound, something electric. Everyone knew that what was coming next would change not just the show, but the way every person in that room, and millions watching at home, would experience the rest of this interview. The stage was set. The tension was palpable. And Zendaya, like the rest of the world, was about to witness a revelation that would leave no one untouched. Jonathan's voice remained calm, almost gentle, but each word carried a weight that seemed to reverberate through the entire studio. "Sometimes," he said, "the greatest blindness isn't physical. It's the blindness of the heart. We can walk through life surrounded by people and still feel unseen, unheard, unvalued. But Jesus sees. He knows. And his love reaches even the places we hide from ourselves." A murmur spread through the audience. Some leaned forward, captivated. Others frowned, unsure how to react. The words weren't harsh or confrontational, but they carried an undeniable force. They struck at the core of everyone listening, challenging assumptions, softening hearts, and stirring emotions. Zendaya's hands, previously resting gently on her lap, now trembled slightly. Her breathing slowed as she tried to absorb the magnitude of what was being said. She had sat through countless interviews, seen many figures speak of faith, inspiration, or purpose, but there was something different about Jonathan's presence. He wasn't preaching. He wasn't dramatizing. He wasn't trying to impress. He was simply speaking truth with a sincerity so pure it demanded acknowledgement. The host, trying to maintain composure, leaned forward and asked, "Jonathan, some people say faith is complicated, or that it doesn't fit into modern life. How do you respond to skeptics?" Jonathan smiled faintly, a quiet, knowing smile. "Faith isn't complicated. We are. We layer doubt, fear, pride, and past mistakes over what is already there, love. Jesus calls to us not through complexity but through simplicity. And sometimes, the challenge isn't in understanding him, it's in letting ourselves be still enough to hear him." An audible silence fell across the room. The staff behind the cameras exchanged glances, some raising eyebrows, unsure if they should step in. The live audience was tense, their attention fixed entirely on Jonathan. Even Zendaya leaned forward in her seat, her voice barely a whisper as she murmured, I didn't expect this." Some skeptics in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Their smiles faltered, and their laughter ceased. A few people reached for their phones, not to call anyone, but to record the moment, sensing that what they were witnessing was rare and powerful. Jonathan's gaze swept over the room, his eyes landing briefly on Zendaya. There was no judgment, only clarity. We often underestimate the impact of simple honesty, simple humility, simple love. And that is why so many of us feel lost. We look for grand answers, complex solutions, when the most profound truths are already present. We just need to recognize them. Zendaya's breath caught. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. The audience seemed collectively aware that this was no ordinary interview. The conflict wasn't external. It wasn't dramatic gestures or shouting. The conflict was internal. It was the confrontation of the heart, the gentle yet undeniable pressure to reconsider, reflect, and feel something deeper than the casual entertainment of the day. A soft gasp came from someone in the crowd. Another whispered, "It's like he's speaking directly to me." The host cleared his throat, realizing that his usual flow of questions and scripted humor had become irrelevant. Jonathan's words had transformed the room, turning a routine segment into a moment of introspection, reflection, and emotional awakening. Zendaya shifted in her seat. Her lips trembled slightly. She wanted to respond, to say something clever, but words failed her. Instead, she sat quietly, listening, absorbing, feeling the weight of what she had just heard. It was uncomfortable and beautiful all at once. Jonathan concluded this part of his message with a calm yet firm tone. Faith doesn't force itself on anyone. It only asks for attention, openness, and honesty. And the choice to listen. That is where transformation begins. The room remained silent. The audience didn't applaud immediately. They didn't murmur. They sat, holding their breath, as if the entire world had narrowed to the space between Zendaya and Jonathan Roumie, waiting to see what would happen next. The studio was silent, almost unnaturally so, as if the world outside the bright lights had disappeared entirely. Zendaya's hand flew instinctively to her chest, her fingers trembling slightly as her breath caught. She hadn't expected to be affected this way. The calm authority in Jonathan Roumie's words had reached deeper than casual listening could ever allow. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. There was a serenity in him that seemed to cut through doubt, pride, and even the usual distractions of a live broadcast. Cameras swiveled subtly to capture her reaction. The lens lingered on her face, catching the momentary widening of her eyes, the subtle glimmer of tears forming at the corners. For once, she was not the interviewer, she was the audience, the witness to a truth that seemed to unfold directly in front of her. Her lips parted slightly, and her usually confident composure softened into genuine awe. Around the studio, the energy shifted. Crew members paused their movements, technicians froze mid-adjustment of their cameras, and even the host, who had seen countless interviews in his career, stopped speaking mid-sentence. Everyone sensed it. This was not ordinary television. This was a moment that demanded stillness, that required witnessing with more than just eyes. It demanded the heart. Some audience members gasped softly, others whispered to each other. "Did he really just say that?" one asked. "It's like he's speaking to me," murmured another. Phones came out, but not in a flurry of frantic recording. These were deliberate, slow movements, almost reverent, as if the people filming recognized they were capturing something rare. A few skeptics shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their earlier smirks replaced by cautious curiosity, their minds quietly wrestling with the unexpected weight of Jonathan's words. Zendaya's gaze never left Jonathan. She leaned forward slightly, as though trying to bridge the distance between the platform of calm wisdom he carried and the seat she occupied. Her mind raced with thoughts she couldn't fully articulate, her emotions rising in waves of surprise, reverence, and something profoundly intimate, a feeling she hadn't anticipated in a live studio interview. Jonathan's presence seemed to hold a gentle power over the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture dramatically. Yet every word he spoke seemed to stretch and fill the space, reaching every corner of the studio and every soul present. The conflict of the previous words, challenging assumptions and touching hearts, had now transformed into reaction, a tangible energy that hovered, almost visible in the air. The host attempted to regain control of the broadcast, clearing his throat and smiling, but it felt forced. His usual rapid-fire humor fell flat, replaced by a quiet acknowledgement that this moment could not be rushed. Even the professional composure of the live production team was softened. The lights, the cameras, the stage itself felt secondary to what was unfolding in the hearts of everyone present. Zendaya's voice broke the silence, barely audible but charged with authenticity. I've never heard someone speak like this, live. It's really moving. Her words hung in the air, echoing the sentiment of the audience. Whispers of agreement and astonishment rippled through the room. Some viewers at home typed furiously into their comments, sharing screenshots, emojis, and stunned reactions, speechless. Tears. This is unlike anything I've seen before. The studio had become a shared space of emotional revelation, a crucible of reflection and heartfelt response, all stemming from the calm, unassuming words of Jonathan Roumie. For Zendaya, it was no longer about the interview or her role in the show. It was about a personal confrontation with truth, with humility, and with the simple yet profound power of words spoken from a place of sincerity. Her reaction, open, raw, and unguarded, mirrored the collective response of the audience, creating a moment that was unforgettable, transformative, and deeply human. In that silence, that shared breath, the stage was no longer just a set. It had become a space of revelation, waiting for what would come next, the moment that would leave the entire studio and millions of viewers at home speechless. The tension in the studio had reached a delicate peak. Every eye remained fixed on Jonathan Roumie, whose calm, unwavering presence seemed almost surreal in the middle of a live broadcast. Zendaya's gaze followed him intently, her body slightly leaning forward as if to catch every nuance of his words. The audience sat frozen, whispers now almost non-existent, replaced by a shared sense that something monumental was about to happen. Then, Jonathan paused. The moment hung in the air, heavy with expectation. He looked around the studio slowly, as though seeing everyone individually, but with a calm that suggested he already knew what was about to unfold. The pause was deliberate, almost cinematic, giving the audience time to feel the weight of anticipation. Zendaya's breath hitched slightly, her instincts telling her that the next words were not just important, they were transformative. He smiled softly, a warm, knowing smile. Many of you may not realize the depth of this message yet, he said. Faith isn't about performance, or appearances, or meeting expectations set by others. It's about love. Real, undeniable love that sees you exactly as you are, even when you doubt it. Even when you hide from it. The audience exhaled collectively. Some leaned forward, some closed their eyes briefly, and others clutched their hands, as if grounding themselves in the moment. Zendaya's eyes glistened, a tear escaping and rolling down her cheek. She whispered almost to herself, "It's like he's speaking directly to me, to all of us." And then it happened. Jonathan's gaze sharpened, and he continued, "But here's the part that often surprises people. Faith is not just about hearing words, it's about realizing who speaks them." The live audience blinked. A few people exchanged nervous glances. The cameras slowly zoomed in on Zendaya, capturing her confusion, her wonder, and the spark of realization forming in her eyes. She tilted her head slightly, curiosity and disbelief warring in her expression. Jonathan smiled again, gently. "You may know me from films, from TV, or from other appearances. But my purpose here tonight is not fame, it's to speak truth." A hush fell so profound that even the hum of the studio lights seemed muted. The host's hand hovered over his notes, realizing that this was no ordinary interview, that the unfolding moment could not be guided by scripts or talking points. Then Jonathan leaned in slightly, his voice calm but layered with authority. Jesus' message is alive today, and he often speaks through people who are willing to be vessels of truth. Tonight, I am simply sharing his love with you, live and without pretense. The realization hit Zendaya like a wave. Her eyes widened fully, and her hands instinctively gripped the edge of her chair. "Wait, do you mean this isn't just an interview?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. "This is real." Jonathan nodded gently, and in that moment, it became clear to everyone. The words were not abstract, theoretical, or performative. They were living truth, delivered with presence, humility, and undeniable sincerity. The audience murmured, some gasping, some whispering prayers quietly to themselves. Cameras captured every reaction. Shock, awe, tears, smiles, and silent contemplation. The reveal wasn't just about who Jonathan Roumie was. It was about the power of the message he carried, the authenticity in his voice, and the way it had touched each heart present. Zendaya sat in awe, her mind racing with reflection. The moment wasn't simply an interview segment anymore. It was an experience, a revelation, a call to notice and feel the love, humility, and faith Jonathan embodied. As the audience absorbed the revelation, the host finally whispered, almost to himself, I don't know what to say. The truth of the moment hung in the air like a tangible presence, quiet, unshakable, and deeply moving. Every person in the room, and millions watching at home, now understood this was not entertainment. This was a living, breathing demonstration of faith, humility, and the quiet power of truth. And Zendaya, along with the entire audience, had just witnessed a moment they would never forget. The energy in the studio had shifted completely. What had begun as a standard live interview had transformed into something far deeper, far more meaningful. Zendaya sat in her chair, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Her hands rested lightly in her lap, but her posture was slightly forward, as if leaning into the weight of the revelation. Her mind replayed Jonathan Roumie's words over and over, the gentle authority, the calm sincerity, and the undeniable presence of someone who spoke not for fame, but for truth. The audience was quiet, though their faces reflected a mixture of awe, disbelief, and profound introspection. Some whispered softly to their neighbors, trying to articulate the feelings that had overtaken them. Some dabbed at tears that had begun forming, not from sadness, but from a sudden clarity, an unexpected confrontation with humility, love, and faith. It was a collective recognition that they had witnessed something rare, a moment that transcended entertainment and entered the realm of personal transformation. Jonathan stood calmly, his expression serene but intense. He had not raised his voice. He had not demanded attention. Yet his presence filled the room, gently commanding focus and reflection. He looked around the studio, and then directly at Zendaya. The purpose of these words, he said softly, isn't to impress or to create spectacle. It's to remind each of us that love and truth are present, even when the world seems too loud or too fast to notice. Zendaya's lips parted slightly, her eyes glistening. She swallowed, her voice trembling as she spoke, almost more to herself than to anyone else. I've never felt something like this on a live show. It's overwhelming, but in the best way. It's like everything is clearer now. The host, who had tried to maintain his composure throughout the segment, finally cleared his throat. His usual scripted smile softened into genuine awe. Jonathan, I don't even know how to describe what just happened here. You didn't just answer questions. You changed the energy in this room. You've changed how I see things. Jonathan's calm smile widened just slightly. That's all it takes, he said gently. One moment of honesty, one act of humility, one acknowledgement of love can shift everything. That's the power we all have if we choose to notice, to listen, and to respond with care. The studio staff, who had been quietly observing behind the cameras, began to breathe again, some wiping at the corners of their eyes. The audience started to clap slowly, almost reverently, as if their applause was both a celebration and a recognition of the gravity of what had occurred. Zendaya joined in, her hands moving with a natural grace, her expression now a mixture of gratitude and reflection. Jonathan glanced one last time around the room, then nodded subtly. His presence remained calm, almost unassuming, yet undeniably impactful. Remember, he said, addressing the entire studio, love and humility are not dependent on circumstance or recognition. They are present for every person, everywhere, if we only take the time to see them. That is the essence of faith in action. Zendaya's eyes lingered on him, her mind still spinning with the depth of the moment. I think I understand now, she whispered, her voice steady but filled with emotion. It's not about following rules or appearances. It's about being honest, being open, being present. The host nodded, finally finding words that matched the sentiment. And that is something we can all take with us, not just from this show, but into our lives. As the cameras panned across the room, capturing every reflective face, every subtle expression of awe, it became clear that the resolution of this moment wasn't a dramatic announcement or grand gesture. It was quiet, profound, and deeply human. Jonathan Roumie's calm presence, his words, and his sincerity had created a ripple of introspection and humility that no script, no production, could have predicted. For Zendaya, for the audience, and for everyone watching at home, the experience was transformational. The revelation had reached its quiet conclusion, leaving hearts stirred, minds opened, and a powerful sense of reverence lingering in the air, a moment they would carry with them long after the broadcast ended. The lights of the studio softened, the cameras slowly pulling back, capturing the stillness that had settled over everyone. For a moment, there was no laughter, no chatter, no scripts, only reflection. Zendaya sat quietly, her hands resting gently on her lap, her gaze lingering on Jonathan Roumie. The energy of the room had shifted completely. The space that had once been a stage for entertainment was now a place of contemplation, of awe, of humility. Jonathan's words had done more than fill a segment of a live show. They had opened eyes, touched hearts, and created a pause, a quiet, profound reminder of something many people often forget. Respect, love, and truth are always present, even when unseen, even when unacknowledged. Zendaya's expression softened into a gentle smile. She seemed transformed, not by spectacle, but by sincerity. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, and being honest with your heart." Her voice carried a reverence that echoed the sentiments of everyone in the audience, whose faces reflected quiet amazement, introspection, and a newfound understanding. The host cleared his throat, his tone subdued yet sincere. Tonight wasn't just about an interview. It was about a reminder that words, spoken from truth and humility, can reach places no script or production ever could. What we witnessed tonight is proof that sometimes, the simplest truths leave the loudest impact. Jonathan nodded once, humbly, as if to acknowledge both the moment and the people who had received it. Faith, love, and respect aren't measured by applause, recognition, or status. They are shown in the quiet moments, in the choices we make when no one is watching, and in how we treat those around us. That is the true power of presence, and the true strength of humility. As the broadcast drew to a close, Zendaya's eyes shone with a quiet, reflective joy. She leaned back slightly, her hands clasped, a smile forming as she whispered again, "I'll never forget this moment." The audience echoed her sentiment, some nodding slowly, some recording the final seconds to remember forever. The moral was clear: true influence comes from sincerity, true power comes from humility, and real respect is earned quietly, not demanded loudly. In a world full of noise, Jonathan Roumie's presence had reminded everyone that the quiet, honest moments often matter most. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility and love are real strength. And tell me, where are you watching from? Every heart touched deserves acknowledgement.